Sorry,
All right.
there's someone at the door. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Okay. Read only. So we'll skip them. First one is category maturity scorecard. So I completed the first like pilot test. I did a run through this morning with Tomas of the maturity scorecard, like script and stuff for the editor extension. I will upload the video at some point today, and then I'll like find an issue. I'll probably, Annabelle and Pedro, tag you both in it and with a link to the doc, just to get your thoughts on like what you saw and make sure that that's okay before I go and find other users to test with. It went fine, but yeah, some feedback would be good. And I've got a couple questions that I want to add in there too about, we are testing the VS Code extension. I mean, we can answer this one out. We're testing the VS Code extension. And for the first scenario, I explicitly say, imagine you're working in VS Code. For the second, we don't say anything sort of explicit about VS Code. It was Tomas, so he just used VS Code like sort of naturally to do that. And so I'm trying to figure out if we should be more leading or less leading about that. So something to think about in terms of like, so we want to test VS Code. I also don't necessarily want to say, go do this in VS Code, but maybe that is the right thing to say, given what we're trying to do here. It's a little bit different, I think, than other GitLab things.
Are you wondering if they're going to jump into a different editor or they might just do it in GitLab?
I think the concern is they would just do it in GitLab, right? And then we don't necessarily get the feedback about VS Code, which is really what we want.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you don't have to answer
Awesome.
now. That's sort of like a preface for the question, unless you've got thoughts.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you, Kai, for working on this, and yeah, I'm curious to see how that first test went, and yeah, cool.
Awesome. Amy, you've got number 4.
Yes, I have a little bit of time. Nobody's looking. Pedro, what do you want? I mean that in the best possible way.
That's amazing. Yeah, I wrote. I was looking at what I had written in that epic, and I was intending to break that down even further with specific issues for each message of the merge widget. But I just haven't had the time, or in other words, did not make time for it because of other things. So if you could, what I would love, of course, we already identified a few things, and in the epic, you have that section proposed changes, which already has, some suggested things that we can do. But what I would love is for you to go through the mapping that I did in the past with all of the states and the screenshots. Some of them could be, slightly outdated because we already updated some of the messages. But for most of them, I don't think we've touched them yet. So if you could go through them and either, create issues for them or at least identify the most problematic ones or the ones that could have a bigger impact if we were to improve them. That's ideally what I would like to see if you have time.
Okay, sounds good. Move that over to the things Amy is picking away at screen. And then the next one, I think Pedro's answered that pretty well. I've just been opening lots of new issues from merge requests, and every time I think, now I have to add 18 labels. Why? And there's a really good reason why we don't do it, but I thought I would ask. That's all. And Pedro, you've got the next thing.
I think for 5, I'll just say, if you think it would be helpful, like all people, go add your thumbs up and add your comment to your use case so we have it at least in the issue and we can always come back to it.
Happily.
Exactly. Good point, Kai. I wanted to discuss next steps for the problem validation of blocking approval. And so I went through all of the feedback from that very popular issue of blocking merge requests with a negative approval signal, and also other related issues and customer comments and so on. And so the main question after all of that is that Kai had was, is there something in this that leads to, we need a way to explicitly reject request changes versus the absence of approval is an implicit rejection. And I think we need both. In the same way that, we're building I think we've been doing not only inside of GitLab, the company, but also with many features that we have, the way we use them, there's a lot of implicit behavior. We had a lot of implicit signals and communication when we did not have the reviewers feature. We're planning the attention requests to have a clearer signal of things that you need to take a look at. And we also have, the approve button, which is a very clear signal that you approved. It's explicit. And I think in the end we would need both, because if you don't approve and you just leave a comment saying, hey, we need to change this, yes, it's clear that you have not approved and you're requesting changes. But it's a very manual way of doing it, and we cannot extract any additional value from it. And so the two problems to me that I actually wrote as two potential solutions. So one of them is, hey, we can add the ability to reject or to request changes. In the same way that some competitor tools, allow you to say, I'm not approving this, I'm requesting changes, or I'm waiting for your response. And so my stance is clear, and we can surface that in other places, or even, send smart email notifications saying that this person is requesting your changes. But at the same time, we also have the other problem that the permissions to resolve threads are not very clear to everyone. And so who resolves the thread? Is it the merge request author who is going through them and addressing them, or is the person who created the thread? And I think we could solve that problem, and it would make things easier for the implicit non-approval. And so when you've finally resolved all of them, it means, oh, the reviewer is probably happy because we resolved all of the threads. There are no open threads. They're going to approve, right? So that's the implicit thing. But on the other hand, we have that other problem that it's not explicit, that you are requesting changes or that you have things you want to see addressed. So I don't think it's a or, I think it's probably a and for this.
You're asking for next steps. I guess what are you proposing are the next steps?
I think the next steps should be to on one hand work out a potential solution for the reject or request changes, and how we could bake that into the product regardless of the thread permissions. And we could create another issue if it doesn't exist today, just talking about and discussing the resolvability of threads, because I think that's another issue that we need to not necessarily solve, but that we need to have an opinion on. So that's probably what I would do, create two issues for those two things. I mean, we already have an issue for the requests, changes or reject, which is that one to block. Although this would not necessarily block the merge request because we don't have functionality today we only have functionality to require approvals. We don't have functionality that says, if someone requests changes or rejects, you cannot merge it. So we would have to look into those things as well. So I think in the end, what I'm trying to say is that I think we have successfully validated these problems, and these two main problems. There are also other parallel problems. And now we need to look into them separately.
Philosophically, let's get away from these two things. Is it possible that we could is there a world where we maybe agree with users that it's a problem of their current workflow, but don't agree it's a problem that we want to address in the product? Is that an outcome that's possible? Or do you think and I sort of asked that in the sense that if you look at sort of the philosophy that GitLab has largely taken around all of these things for the last 10 years, there haven't been blocking measures in the product. And they're sort of everything is more permissive rather than less permissive, is sort of the philosophy that GitLab as a product has. That's starting to change, right? We have compliance groups and they're doing other things, but is that our going down either one of these paths feels like a substantial change in the way we've historically thought about the merge request. And so I guess I wonder, is that a change that we'd also sort of be committing that we want to change that as well if we were to go down these paths?
I think it depends on how you frame it. Approval rules are blocking measures. They block things to merge. The moment you set something, it needs at least one approval. If it doesn't get that approval, it's blocking. So do you mean, so I think you mean like implicit blocking. And implicit blocking, if threads must be resolved, I just need to create a thread and it's blocked until someone resolves it. Even as a guest or even as a reporter role, I can go into a merge request and create a resolvable thread and it's not going to be merged. So I'm already blocking it explicitly. Yeah. Yeah, as I said, I think, it's, clarifying the reviewer's stance as a first class status, saying, I'm not approving this, I'm requesting changes, or I need to see some responses first. Then there's also the blocking parts where I click a button or something and it's the opposite of approving. So it's blocking the merge request without having to create a thread. And then there's also the problem of merge request authors or someone else resolving my threads. And I don't want them to be resolved because I only want this to be merged when they are resolved. So I don't think we're doing anything. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know where that's what you were explaining right now, like what we've done in the past. I don't know where that comes from. And because it just depends on how you frame it, I guess.
I think if you look at the tool today, right, like there are not permissions around thread resolution, right? Anyone can resolve a thread, right? We don't, what I think, like, I guess my questions would be, do these things put us on a path where you inadvertently create sort of single points of blocking, which is something that's not really possible today. You could use approval rules, but like in many cases, like multiple people are assigned to approval rules. But like if you think about threads today, one of the complaints in the blocking thing is like, well, anyone can resolve a thread. But if we go down a path where we say like, well, let's make the reviewer's position clear, they're either rejecting it because they're requesting changes or they're approving it. Well, it doesn't really matter because I don't actually need their approval. I just need someone's approval to do this, right? And so the question is are we going to move to a model where like these would be sort of foundational steps to making it so like Kai, could review a merge request and Kai could be the only person that could unblock that merge request. And I think there are people that want that. But as a product, we've never really made it so that like one person could block it, unless you go and explicitly sort of configure an approval rule. But like you couldn't, like one person can't like participate in a merge request and explicitly block it. And this would be a very drastic step. Like if we got to a point where like Kai can I could go block every single merge request I want, like because of that, right? And I think that's the question that I have is like, are we going down a path that puts us in this like sort of more combative position against positively affirming code forward and getting things merged in a way that's like, I don't want you to merge that, so like I'm gonna block it. Like I think that's sort of the question.
No. At least from the feedback that I went through, that was not the impression that I had, and I didn't see anyone explicitly ask for that. I actually saw the opposite, a different perspective, which is, yes, I want to block it, but I'm also aware that if I'm unavailable, or if for some reason there's someone senior to me, they should be able to merge it, right? And they should be able to unblock things. So there always needs to be an escape hatch for this. The only way, let's imagine we designed this perfect system. The only way that like your merge request could be effectively blocked forever is if you only have, for example, one project maintainer, and they could be the only person to unblock it, and they're saying, I'm not going to unblock it. But that's
also the only person who could merge it. So if you're talking about resolving threads at the maintainer and above permission level, those are the only people that can merge it anyway. So that sounds like it kind of makes sense.
It depends on the project settings. So for protected branches, you can have developers merge their merge requests, even their own merge requests. So they don't need a maintainer. The maintainer role is what we do for the GitLab project, but you can change that to be developers or even specific people. So yeah, I think Kai, I'm not afraid of that, because I didn't see that in this feedback. And everyone was talking about, for everything, that they wanted escape hatches, like for resolving threads. If for some reason the person that created the thread is not there to resolve it, or if someone senior thinks like, hey, we need to unblock this, I'm going to override this, they are able to resolve it, and so on. I think what people are talking about is especially a merge request author being able to merge things without having everything addressed, or even if we have all of the required approvals, if someone like from security, let's imagine that they don't have security approval rules set up. I have all of the necessary approvals. Like, for example, 3 reviewers approved everything, but then a security engineer comes in and creates an issue, a thread, and says, hey, this is a security vulnerability. We cannot merge this before it's addressed. Boom. And someone resolves and merges the merge request. That's what they want to avoid, basically. And again, I think all of these are exceptions. These would not be the norm, right? Because usually the developer, in a healthy environment, they look at reviewers' comments, they address them. Maybe they resolve the thread, or the reviewer resolves them, they approve, and everything goes well. These are, I think, for the exceptional cases.
I think that's fair. I think I would like to see us, as part of this, and sort of before we go down this path, know where we're going to draw the line, particularly like with regards to settings, or how granular we'll get, or how hard we want to be about blocking things. Because I think you're right. Potentially these two things don't come with explicit, maybe hardcore blocks that like could lock a merge request until that one person gets back. But they crack open Pandora's box on how many settings and options we're willing to add to make that possible. And so I think we need to be very careful about this. Like, even just like, I was reading your feedback on like the threads piece, like that immediately to me, I feel like you're going to get 4 or 5 different versions of settings that people want, right? People are going to want developers, they're going to want maintainers, they're going to want developers plus maintainers, they're going to want to be able to pick specific people, they're going to want to say merge. Like, there's like immediately 10 options that you could put in there. And like that doesn't feel correct if we need 10 options to sort of deal with it. And I think similarly, like, a change request, like it doesn't really matter if I can say I request changes, but like anyone could go back and approve it because they just bypassed my approval and got a different maintainer, right? Like, I think these are nervous paths to be on, because I think they're going to open this like natural addition of, I want more settings, I want more settings, I want more settings. And I think we just need to be able to have a stronger opinion about what that is. And I think up until we've sort of like done this probable validation, our opinion has largely been like, oh, you have developers and maintainers, and like you should trust them to like work appropriately and respond appropriately and behave appropriately and like merge request. And so like this is a divergence from that behavior. We're sort of like saying we don't trust teams to operate like grown-ups anymore. To some extent, is what that is.
Yeah. I think that's why I said I think the comment resolution or the thread resolution is the trickiest to get right. There might be, some very small quick wins here regarding, for example, guests and reporters and things like that. But other than that, I think we will get into a very big options space because it will largely depend on how people want to work. I think the reject or request changes is something that we could work towards. For example, if a reviewer or if someone in an approval rule specifically, they reject or request changes, you cannot merge it, for example. In the same way that anyone, I think we should do the opposite of what we do with approvals today. Like anyone in the project can approve, any developer, but if you have required approvals, only certain people's approval counts. And I think the same thing, if we do the same thing for rejection or requesting changes, it would be, easy to understand and it would block the merge. But anyway, we've gone over time. I will look into the issue again and digest this a bit more, but I'm happy to for having this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile conversation, and I want to talk about it more. I'll probably put some other time on your calendar because I want to talk about whatever the last item, number 7, whatever number it is on the agenda. But I also have to jump, so
okay.
We'll talk again soon.
Cool. Nice seeing
Bye,
you
everyone.
all. Bye-bye. Bye.